Long Beach, California, USA, the skyscraper skyline which dominates the scene of round 3 of the 1982 World Motor Racing Championship at the United States Grand Prix West. There is the Queen Mary, now a hotel, very much part of the Long Beach scene. And as we look down now towards the assembling cars and their mechanics and their drivers, a surprise on pole position. The youngest man in the race for only his 19th Grand Prix, Andrea de Cesaris, has put the Alfa Romeo on pole position with a very, very fast lap at the very, very closing stages of practice. There's the man who so nearly had pole position, who dominated most of practice, Niki Lauda in the latest Marlboro McLaren. Niki Lauda having come back from his retirement at the beginning of this year. That's the current World Championship leader, Alain Prost, in the Renault Turbo. And this is a circuit where Renault have never ever scored a World Championship point. Further back down the grid, the reigning world champion, Nelson Piquet. He's on 6th position in the grid, and he is a past winner here at Long Beach, and a man who understands the street circuit very, very clearly. The crowd now milling as we look at the grid. De Cesaris on pole, Niki Lauda alongside him. Row 2, René Arnoux, the faster of the 2 turbo Renaults, then his teammate Prost alongside him. Row 3 is Bruno Giacomelli in the other Alfa Romeo, and Nelson Piquet in the Brabham. Then we have Gilles Villeneuve in the Turbo Ferrari, and Keke Rosberg, one of the stars of the Brazilian Grand Prix 2 weeks ago, Pironi's Ferrari, and Jarier going very well in the Ozella. Then John Watson in the other McLaren, and Michele Alboreto, a rising Italian star, in the Tyrrell, Eddie Cheever's Ligier, Mario Andretti taking over from Carlos Reutemann in the Williams, Lafitte's Ligier, De Angelis' Lotus, Nigel Mansell of Great Britain in the other Lotus, then Riccardo Patrese in the second Brabham, Roberto Guerrero, who drives an Enzyme, Brian Henton in an Arrows, his teammate Jochen Mass also in an Arrows, then Derek Daly, Raoul Boesel, Mass of course in a March I should say, as is Boesel, Slim Borgard in a Tyrrell, Winkelhock from the German ATS team, and his teammate Salazar also in an ATS. So while some people find quieter places to spend a Sunday afternoon, the skyscrapers and the balconies are crammed with people waiting for a 75-lap race as the field lines up on the start line on Shoreline Drive. The finish is the other side of the circuit, but this is the start line. We wait for the red light. There's the red light. Now for the green. There is the green. And De Cesaris it is who makes a perfect start. Andrea De Cesaris, from his first pole position, makes a perfect start. The rest of the field away, and it was Arnoux in the Renault who's coming up. Arnoux is second. It's Niki Lauda who's moving into third place. Bruno Giacomelli has made a good start. Prost and Villeneuve are next up. But the leader in the Alfa Romeo, Andrea De Cesaris, as the rest of the field goes streaming round for the half lap that will take them round to the pits, because the race, in fact, 75.5 laps long. As the field streams through, that's Villeneuve in the Ferrari going through there, but the turbo's well done, and it's a V12 Alfa Romeo engine in the leading car of Andrea De Cesaris. There he is, number 22, red and white. Then it's Arnoux. Niki Lauda pushing Arnoux in third place in McLaren number 8. Fourth is Bruno Giacomelli, who saw him coming over the brow of the hill there. There he is in fourth place. The red car behind him going into the corner now and out of the picture to the left. That is the faster of the 2 Ferraris, Gilles Villeneuve. But look at the lead that Andrea De Cesaris is already pulling out on this first lap here at Long Beach. Through the tight hairpin. The Renault is still second. Lauda is still third. The Ferrari is still fifth. Prost is sixth. Didier Pironi is next up, and Rosberg, Keke Rosberg of the Williams, is behind Pironi in 8th place, and Nelson Piquet is 9th. There you see some measure of the lead, but young Andrea De Cesaris has already pulled out as he goes now on the fastest part of the circuit down Shoreline Drive, and the Renault, the Turbo Renault, pulling away from its pursuing Niki Lauda as they go into the tight right-hander on Shoreline Drive. This is part of the new section because the circuit has been changed this year. The long drag down into that hairpin where Clay Rickettsoni had his terrible accident a couple of years ago, that has now all gone, and we have a new section which has made the circuit a little slower and has added even more corners and even more curbs and even more walls to trap the unwary. Very much a street circuit, and Niki Lauda there in third place, very close indeed to René Arnoux. Arnoux in the yellow Renault is second. Lauda is third. Still in fourth place, it's Bruno Giacomelli in the Alfa Romeo, and the darker red car that you just saw coming into the picture there is the Turbo Ferrari of Gilles Villeneuve, but that's Arnoux, Lauda and Giacomelli. And the leader already out of the picture and away, and that is one of the ATSs. That looks like Salazar's ATS, and already the walls have got their first victim. The rear wheel has struck the concrete wall, and the ATS is out. No room at all here for a mistake. Unlike other circuits where a wheel on the grass means perhaps a split-second loss, but not much more. Here, a wheel out of line can mean retirement. This is Arnoux in second place, Lauda in third place. And still De Cesaris leads. There's De Cesaris, there is Arnoux, the turbocharged Renault, of course using a smaller but much more powerful engine with its turbocharger than Niki Lauda there in third place with the 3-litre V8 Cosworth engine, which has been winning Grand Prix races since the late 1960s. But this is De Cesaris with the V12 Alfa engine. A very much prettier car this year for Alfa Romeo than their rather heftier looking machine last year, and Alfa Romeo benefiting from the fact that Gérard Ducarouge, the former Ligier designer, joined their team last year, and De Cesaris doing a very, very good job indeed with his much slimmer and clearly much better handling car. De Cesaris was with the McLaren team last year, earned himself a very unfortunate reputation for having a lot of accidents, but so far at least a very smooth drive indeed. And bear in mind the pressure that is on this young man, because the eyes of the Formula One racing world are on him. He had this pole position. In fact, he was so overcome when he heard the news that he'd got it that he burst into tears at the end of the practice session. But here, this looks like a very mature drive from a very fast young man. De Cesaris then on his way, and look at the gap that already he has pulled out over the Turbo Renault. And the Turbo Renault may be the most powerful car in the race, but it's clearly much more of a handful round these tight turns. Niki Lauda has perhaps fallen back a little bit now. Lauda perhaps having made his initial attempt to snatch second place from Arnoux, now decides to wait for a little bit, taking a right-hand line as they go down past the crowded pit section and plunge downhill through Penthouse Corner. And Lauda dropping back a bit, but he can't afford to drop back too much because Bruno Giacomelli in the last red car of that leading quartet, he, in the other Alfa Romeo, he is the teammate of the leader, De Cesaris. If Niki Lauda falls back anymore, he'll be in the grips of that very, very powerful Alfa Romeo, which is in fourth place. Niki Lauda with more experience than so many of the other drivers in this race. Content at this stage, perhaps, to bide his time. 75.5 laps around Long Beach is a very long way. Lauda then, and the similar colouring between the Alfa Romeos and the McLarens comes of course from their shared sponsor. The Marlboro cigarette people sponsor both of these cars, but identification is made a little bit easier by the fact that the McLarens have a red rear wing, and when we look in a minute at the leading Alfa Romeo, you'll see it has a black rear wing. That's the yellow Renault, that is the red and white McLaren. They're in second and third place. And coming up behind in fourth place, Bruno Giacomelli. And And Lauda perhaps closing a little bit now. Lauda making another effort, and he's got to because Giacomelli is not very far away. Over the brow and bumping down the hill once more. And Long Beach, a very bumpy circuit, and that's particularly hard work with the current generation of Formula One cars, which have very, very little suspension movement. You can see the drivers' heads bouncing in the cockpit as the cars jerk from bump to bump. And now the second place battle has closed up. Arnoux in the Renault is second. Lauda in the McLaren is third. Fourth is Bruno Giacomelli. And as they go through the constant twists and turns, Lauda once again looks for a little gap. He's waiting for Arnoux to make the tiniest mistake. And Lauda has the task that so many drivers have in Formula One racing now of being behind a turbocharged car which is quicker down the straight. And even though it's slower in the corners, the turbocharged car can keep the gate shut and leave no gap, provided Arnoux doesn't make any sort of mistake. Niki Lauda's task, we've got yellow flags there, yellow flag, somebody else must have hit the wall, but provided Arnoux doesn't make a mistake, Lauda's task is going to be a very difficult one. Past the start-finish straight once, and once again Lauda pulls across to the right-hand side of the road, but once again the Renault's power pulls him away, and Lauda can't get close enough to get onto contention. And these three, battling for second place, have pulled away considerably from the pursuit, which is currently led by Villeneuve. Villeneuve back there in fifth place at the moment. And Lauda very close indeed now. Lauda very close. And Giacomelli is going alongside. Giacomelli goes through. And Giacomelli punts into the back of Arnoux. And it's all over for Arnoux. He's out of second place. Giacomelli clearly also out of the race. And Niki Lauda, here we see it again. Lauda makes a little go on the right, leaves the left open. Giacomelli goes through, leaves his braking too late. Lauda keeps well out of the way. Lauda locking up his front wheels as well. But Giacomelli smack into the back of René Arnoux, and that has completely finished that second place battle. Arnoux is out, Giacomelli is out, and Niki Lauda is now in a clear second place. There you see Villeneuve now promoted to third, Keke Rosberg fourth in the Williams. Watson is now up to fifth, ahead of Piquet. John Watson has passed Nelson Piquet, and that's a great effort from the Irishman because he was in 11th position on the grid, and John Watson, of course Niki Lauda's teammate in the other Marlboro McLaren, Watson is really flying. Watson is fifth, Piquet is sixth, Villeneuve is now up to third, and that's Pironi. That's Didier Pironi in the Turbo Ferrari. That's Villeneuve's teammate, and he is clearly out. It looked like mechanical trouble because he's just parked the car by the side of the road. And as is usually the case here at Long Beach, they're dropping out like flies. But this is the leader. The slightly fatter profile and the black rear wing on this red and white car tells us that it's an Alfa Romeo. It is the leader, number 22, Andrea de Cesaris. That's Arnoux. The car parked, look at the rear wheel, all askew, and that's the other Renault. That is Alain Prost, and he is parking. So both of the Renaults are this early. That's Bruno Giacomelli, who was involved in that incident we just saw. Bruno Giacomelli reduced to a spectator. This is his fellow Italian, Andrea de Cesaris, still in the lead. Now, of course, Niki Lauda now has clear road between himself and the leader, Andrea de Cesaris, and it's now that Lauda can start to pile on the pressure. That's de Cesaris once more, but Niki Lauda can start to pile on the pressure and start to close. And there you see the two of them with one of the arrows in front, the orange car and arrows, but that is de Cesaris, and Niki Lauda is now in his mirrors. That's de Cesaris once more, and the gap 2.8 seconds now, with 14 laps now completed, and de Cesaris now must feel the pressure. His pit signals will be telling him of Lauda's ever-increasing approach, but now his mirrors will be telling him also. And of course, De Cesaris, with only 18 Grand Prix under his belt, he's got Henton's Arrows to lap in front of him. And there is Lauda getting ever closer. Lauda with 115 Grand Prix under his belt, immensely more experience. When Lauda first moved into Grand Prix racing, Andrea De Cesaris was still a little lad in school. And the Arrows is kept out of the way, and now both of them are through, and this is the first and second. This is the battle for the lead starting to develop. Lauda now piling on the pressure. You don't need a stopwatch anymore to see how close they are. Andrea De Cesaris, with such a reputation for accidents, he was frequently quite fast last year, but he scored but one championship point for McLaren. He crashed 6 times in races and something like another 10 times in practice, but so far under the strongest possible pressure from one of the canniest drivers in the world, Niki Lauda, Andrea De Cesaris is keeping his line, he's driving smoothly, he's doing everything that we would expect of him. And they're coming up to another back marker. I think that's probably going to be Raul Boesel in the March. And of course, on this tight circuit, lapping back markers can make an awful lot of difference. You may have to wait your moment. It is indeed Boesel. And De Cesaris tries to squeeze through. That's delayed him a little bit, and Lauda's got a run at him. And Lauda goes storming by. De Cesaris just had to pause for a second. He's coming back, but Lauda has the right-hand side of the road. He has the line, and De Cesaris has to give best. He just had to falter for a moment to pass Boesel, and that was the little moment that Lauda needed. Here we see it again, and Lauda, having got the run up the inside, a perfectly executed manoeuvre, that was what he was waiting for. And Niki Lauda in, let's remember, only his 3rd Grand Prix since coming back after a 2-year retirement. Niki Lauda leads. He's deliberately waited. It's taken him 16 laps to come to the front. A very, very canny drive indeed. He kept out of all the problems which Giacomelli had with Arnoux, and there he is at the front, and that's obviously where he's fixing to stay. Still in second place, of course, Andrea De Cesaris and John Watson, whom we mentioned earlier, this fighting drive up by John Watson. John Watson now in 3rd place. Gilles Villeneuve in the Turbo Ferrari is 4th. He's now under pressure from Keke Rosberg in the Williams, who is 5th. And Nelson Piquet onto the leaderboard now with the Brabham. He is 6th. But still, the red and white cars at the front. Niki Lauda the leader, Andrea De Cesaris 2nd, McLaren Cosworth leads, Alfa Romeo 2nd. Now it'll be interesting to see whether Lauda's teammate Watson, there you see the gap, 18 seconds behind Watson, 18 seconds behind Lauda, Villeneuve 4th and Rosberg 5th, very, very close indeed. The stopwatch can barely separate them, and Piquet a further 4 seconds down in 6th place. And that's after 15 laps of the 75. And now Long Beach giving us the sort of fascinating race that it always does, because overtaking is difficult here. The field tends to bunch up. But Lauda now, will he start to move away from De Cesaris? And we're going to see De Cesaris touch that wall again. I thought he did have a bit of a moment there. And that, of course, is the very great danger here at Long Beach. That's the danger for Lauda, that's the danger for De Cesaris, that those ever-present walls, just a half a centimetre offline, you use every inch of the road to get the best racing line. If you use an inch that isn't there, then you're up against the walls, and just a scrape can mean a puncture, it can mean knocking your suspension out of true, and of course that could spoil the handling, that can give you tyre wear problems. And that's Alain Prost, a very unhappy looking Alain Prost, because of course he can see his World Championship lead being eaten away, and that is Mario Andretti. Andretti, 15 years in Grand Prix racing, 127 Grand Prix, course, driving in place of Carlos Reutemann here today, and he is in the pits, and this looks like the battle between Villeneuve and Rosberg. Rosberg is right up to Villeneuve now. This is the fourth place battle. The Ferrari with that great big double wing on the back. Rosberg in the Williams. And Villeneuve in the Turbo Ferrari. And this makes us think of the Brazilian Grand Prix just 2 weeks ago, when there was that wonderful battle for the lead between Piquet, Villeneuve and Rosberg, which ended up in Villeneuve going off the road under pressure. And it's Rosberg now who is putting the pressure on Villeneuve. There's John Watson. There you see Watson in third place, 2 back markers, an arrows and a march, and Villeneuve goes through past Raul Boesel in the march, and Rosberg follows him through. Lots of traffic around now. Villeneuve in the red car, the Ferrari, the white and green car, the Saudia Williams of the Finnish driver Keke Rosberg. This, of course, is the Williams FW07, such a very successful racing car, probably now having its final run because there's a new Williams coming for the European season. And Rosberg is very, very close indeed. Rosberg is alongside, and Rosberg goes ahead. But Villeneuve is fighting back. Villeneuve has to give best in the corner. And Rosberg it is who has gone ahead now into fourth place. And Villeneuve now looking for the slipstream to help him pull by. A lot of power in this Ferrari. And the Ferrari fights back. And look at the way the Ferrari just accelerates past the Williams. Another 40 or 50 horsepower. And Rosberg's coming back. But Villeneuve, the little Canadian driver, very canny, shuts the door in Rosberg's face. Past the dead Ferrari of Didier Pironi, parked by the side of the road, the very much alive Ferrari of Gilles Villeneuve, and Keke Rosberg, who already has a useful third place in the World Championship after 2 good drives already this season. Rosberg now fighting hard, and Rosberg looking at the inside line as they come past the pits and turn downhill. The car's dancing across the road over the bumps. And look at this big double rear wing on the back of the Ferrari. That's new for this race. It's a rather controversial interpretation of the regulations by Mauro Forgieri, but so far it hasn't been protested. And it's obviously helping the car on this circuit because, having tried it in practice, they've kept it for the race. And once again, Rosberg does the same thing. Rosberg pulls alongside as they go onto Shoreline Drive into the new chicane. And Rosberg once more is ahead. Now, can Villeneuve use the Ferrari's power to pull back again? Along beside the Pacific Ocean. And this time Villeneuve seems to have fallen back a little. He isn't close enough. He gets into the slipstream. He tries on the outside this time. It's very slippery there, and he's off. He spins to a halt. He doesn't pull it, and goodness me, he didn't waste any time. And that's Nelson Piquet. You just saw Piquet fighting back, but now we see it again. Villeneuve, having been denied the right-hand side of the road, goes to the left where it's very, very slippery, hits his brakes, the rear wheels lock, you see the rubber smoke, and the car slides. He piles on the opposite lock, spins it neatly to a halt, and at once accelerates back into the race. And as you saw a flash there, he dived back on just in front of Nelson Piquet, and that means that Villeneuve, having lost his battle with Keke Rosberg, is now got Piquet in his mirrors, and Rosberg is already straight up to John Watson. So John Watson in third place, Keke Rosberg in fourth place, and Rosberg now going very, very hard indeed, and Rosberg is alongside Watson, but once again Watson takes the line. This is the battle for third. John Watson of Northern Ireland in the McLaren, Keke Rosberg of Finland in the Williams. And this is lap 23. So not yet 1/3 distance, and already the pace beginning to tell John Watson having come superbly up from 11th place on the grid up to 3rd place, but now he is being challenged very hard. You saw a flash behind there of Gilles Villeneuve, who still has 5th place ahead of Piquet. This is John Watson who's 3rd. And Piquet in 6th place. That's going to get him a championship point, and that's what he so earnestly wants, to have any hope of retaining his world championship. But Rosberg charging hard in 4th place in the green and white car. The red and white car is John Watson of Northern Ireland, and the battle is for 3rd place. Once more into the new chicane at the start of Shoreline Drive. You see the wire fences, the safety fences put up. This whole area, of course, is the centre of downtown Long Beach, and for the week of the Grand Prix, the whole town changes completely as concrete walls are put up. And now once more, Rosberg has a little look. There you see the order, and there you see the gaps with the stopwatch barely splitting Watson and Rosberg in their battle for 3rd place. Niki Lauda still, of course, the leader. Andrea de Cesaris still going very, very well and doing great things for his reputation in 2nd place. And this, once more, is the battle for 3rd. Rosberg in John Watson's wheel tracks. Once again, Rosberg looks at the right-hand side of the road as they come past the pits, but that's a very difficult place to overtake, and Rosberg thinks better of it. This circuit very, very hard on brakes, as you would expect, with the multiple tight corners, and you can see the big scoops on the back of Rosberg's car, just inboard of the rear wheels, which duct cold air onto the rear brakes to try to keep them cool. And Watson pulling out a little bit this time. Once more, Rosberg closes up in the hairpin. 500 horsepower accelerating them out of the hairpin into the chicane before Shoreline Drive. And once more onto the fastest part of the circuit. This is where Niki Lauda took the lead a few laps ago. Niki Lauda, of course, John Watson's teammate in the Marlboro McLaren team. And Rosberg closing up in the slipstream. On go the brakes, and Rosberg not making an attempt this time, but waiting for a tiny mistake of any sort by Watson, which will give him the opportunity to squeeze by. And Rosberg hit the wall quite hard there. Rosberg scraped along the wall with one of the left-hand wheels of the Williams, hard enough to tear the advertising hoarding, and I wonder if that's done any damage to his car. And we're going to see it again. He misses it coming out of the corner, but there's a little apex there, and he hits it quite hard. And that's Nelson Piquet. That is Piquet who has really hit the wall. Nelson Piquet in 6th place, battling with Villeneuve, and Piquet is very much out of the race. The reigning world champion is in the wall and out of the race. So Long Beach claiming more and more victims, and still John Watson has the 3rd place. The leader, Niki Lauda, in the Marlboro McLaren. 2nd man, Andrea de Cesaris in the Alfa Romeo. 3rd man, there he is, John Watson in the Marlboro McLaren. 4th, Keke Rosberg in the Williams. And 5th, Gilles Villeneuve in the Ferrari. Rosberg applying the relentless, patient pressure which is so much a part of modern Grand Prix racing. And that's the other Brabham, that's Riccardo Patrese, and he's hit something because one of the front flippers, he's obviously spun, and one of the front flippers missing off the front of that car, one of the front aerofoils, which isn't going to... And Rosberg is alongside Watson. The car weaving under braking, and Rosberg has done it. This is Rosberg in 3rd place. And a little sideways moment for Watson there as they came out of that corner. That was Piquet's car, still parked in a very dangerous position. Watson apparently sliding more than he should. Possibly he's got some sort of problem. There is, that's Jarier in the Azella. So he's yet another victim. But the new 3rd man, Keke Rosberg, there he is. Watson already back in fourth, and they're trying to move Piquet's car. And that car, and particularly that breakdown truck, is absolutely on the racing line. The yellow flags will be waving, but that is a particular hazard which Long Beach does not need. The marshals working to try and move Piquet's stricken car as we watch Keke Rosberg, the new third man, going on his way. Lauda still the leader, De Cesaris still in second place. And that was, that's Jacques Lafitte. We were watching the leader go past the stranded Piquet and the breakdown track, but that's Jacques Lafitte. And this is John Watson coming into the pits. Watson in the pits. So, lap 30 and its tyres. We wondered about the handling of his car just after he'd let Rosberg by, and Watson has come in for a fresh set of Michelins. The engine's still running, you can hear it. And there we see the other Marlboro McLaren of the leader, number 8, Niki Lauda of Austria. So, as Lauda goes on his way, and you saw there a glimpse of De Cesaris, who is still not very far away. John Watson having lost fourth place now because he's made a pit stop for fresh tyres. So Rosberg now the third man, and that has promoted Gilles Villeneuve in the Ferrari now to fourth place. This is Lauda. You can see his hands working hard on the steering wheel around this so very twisty circuit. Very, very hard work indeed for 2 hours. And a bright sunny day, although not terribly hot, and that must be a relief for the drivers because it was so very hot in Brazil 2 weeks ago. Several drivers suffered from heat exhaustion. No such problems here, but a lot of problems for a lot of drivers nevertheless. We've seen Lafitte out, we've seen Jarier spin, we've seen, of course, Arnoux and Giacomelli out in the very early stages. We've seen Nelson Piquet in the wall, and those walls are ever present, beckoning you to make the tiniest mistake. We've seen, indeed, Rosberg and Lauda both scrape the wall, and that's an extraordinary sight. The breakdown truck right on the racing line, dragging Piquet's car out of the way, and of course because of the concrete walls it can't go anywhere else. That's E.E.U.U. De Angelis' Lotus there, and we're going to see it again. The breakdown truck, instead of clinging to the concrete wall to keep out of the way, is right in the middle of the road. Nevertheless, the race still goes on. The Queen Mary in the background. And now this is the new battle for fourth place. It's Michele Alboreto in the Tyrrell who's come storming up to close on Gilles Villeneuve for fourth place. And that's De Cesaris! De Cesaris, the second man! Andrea De Cesaris, the car apparently to a small extent anyway on fire, but no doubt about the damage to the front. De Cesaris has gone into the wall and he's still in the car, almost unable to believe what has happened to him. Andrea De Cesaris in second place, having driven the race of his life from pole position, having led Niki Lauda for 15, 16 laps. One of his shoes seems to have come off in the accident. He's calmly standing in the car, putting his shoe back on, and now he steps out. The front of the car absolutely destroyed, clearly unhurt, but he must be a very, very disappointed man indeed. So sadly, Andrea De Cesaris' reputation as a man who has accidents seems today to be enhanced, and that's cruel luck, and that's a poor reward for what has been thus far a superb drive. And here we have another battle, because this is E.E.U.U. De Angelis and Riccardo Patrese, the Brabham that we saw lose its front flipper in a spin earlier, the black and gold Lotus of E.E.U.U. De Angelis and Patrese. This is the battle for sixth place. There you see the yellow flags because of De Cesaris' accident, but yet another wonderful Long Beach battle this time for 6th place and a championship point. Elio De Angelis in the Lotus, Riccardo Patrese in the Brabham, 2 Italians. That's one of the Arrows being dragged away, one of the orange Arrows cars. But this still the battle for 6th place. De Angelis and Patrese. Riccardo Patrese, who was perhaps the man who suffered worst from the intense heat in Brazil. He actually spun off and retired because of serious heat exhaustion, but going very hard indeed, and despite that earlier spin, he's come up the field to put the pressure on De Angelis for 6th place. And Patrese looking for his first championship point for the Brabham team, because he only joined the Brabham team this year after a long loyal period to the Arrows team of Alan Rees and Jackie Oliver. Elio De Angelis once more with Lotus. And on Shoreline Drive, their 2 Cosworth V8s singing away, and first go one side goes Patrese, then he looks at the other, but De Angelis manages to keep the door shut. You can see the full face science fiction helmets that these drivers wear. Patrese keeping the pressure on then, still pushing, still looking for the gap. That's the wheel left behind from poor Andrea de Cesaris' McLaren, and De Angelis under real pressure from Patrese now. In front of them, in 5th place, it's Eddie Cheever in the Ligier. Cheever is 5th, and Patrese looks one side, then he goes the other, and this time Patrese's surely done it. Patrese goes through. Yes, the Brabham is by, and so new 6th man, Riccardo Patrese in the Brabham. 5th is Eddie Cheever, 4th is Michele Alboreto in the Tyrrell, and De Angelis is demoted for the time being anyway. We're going to see it again. He went first one side, and as De Angelis pulled to the left to shut the door, Patrese chopped across to the right, had the inside line as they plunged downhill and into Penthouse Corner. And that is Eddie Cheever, the 5th man. He's in the pits for fresh tyres. The engine, the V12 Vatra engine, still running, but that has cost Cheever his 5th place. The young American who lives in Italy, going very well indeed with the Ligier in 5th place, but that's pulled him right out as we see. That is one of the McLarens there. It is, of course, the leader, Niki Lauda, and it's Slim Borgard in the Tyrrell, the Scandinavian driver whom Lauda has just lapped. Niki Lauda then comfortably out in front with his closest pursuer now gone, Andrea de Cesaris, after his accident, and the pursuit therefore coming from the Finn Keke Rosberg. Lauda working his way past, that's Jochen Mass in the march in front of him. Lauda working his way through these back markers. Borgard has just been lapped, and now Jochen Mass is lapped by Niki Lauda. Niki Lauda, who has been training very, very hard since he announced his comeback last autumn. Lauda has trained very hard to get to the peak of fitness required to drive these Formula One cars, and remember, 2 years completely away from the Formula One circuit, and if you're seeing him drive today, you wouldn't believe it had done him any harm at all. The characteristic jerking of the head, which all these drivers have because of the small suspension movement on the cars, a very, very bumpy drive that you get in a Grand Prix car. Phenomenal grip from these very wide-bodied cars, which use the shape of the underneath of the car to help to suck it down onto the ground and give more grip. And of course the very, very sticky, grippy, treadless tyres that all cars use in dry weather conditions in Grand Prix racing. And Rosberg still a distant second. There he is. his blue and white helmet tucked down in the cockpit, a very hard, charging, chunky little driver, Keke Rosberg, 33.5 seconds the gap, and Villeneuve, as you see, 70 seconds behind the leader. Alboreto a further 22 seconds behind Villeneuve in 4th place. So Alboreto's challenge to Villeneuve has now faded, and Alboreto is himself slipping back. Villeneuve 3rd, Alboreto 4th, and Patrese now the 5th man after the pit stop for Eddie Cheever, and De Angelis therefore back onto the leaderboard in 6th place. But this is Keke Rosberg, and Rosberg doing everything he can, a man who never gives up, doing everything he can to close the gap between him and Niki Lauda. It seems an impossible task, but Rosberg isn't going to give up until he sees the checkered flag. Rosberg, a man of undoubted ability, and many people agree that this is now the first time that he's had a truly competitive car in Grand Prix racing and can really show his ability. He went well in South Africa in the opening race of the season, despite some problems. He went brilliantly in Brazil 2 weeks ago, and he's now lying at this point 3rd in the World Championship, and if he can hang on to this position, then that's going to do his championship points an awful lot of good. 33 years old, lives not in Finland anymore, but in Monte Carlo. And there's Lauda, with a glimpse of Nigel Mansell, that was behind Lauda. Nigel Mansell in the second of the 2 Lotuses, the teammate to E.E.U.U. De Angelis, and there you see the gap from Lauda to Rosberg, 36.6 seconds now. So Lauda continuing to dominate this race. But a question must now be asked about tyre wear, because Lauda is on Michelin tyres, and Watson, of course, his teammate, had to make a pit stop for tyres. Watson having gone tremendously quickly in the early stages and having moved up from 11th place on the grid to 3rd, wore his tyres out sufficiently to need a pit stop for a fresh set. And one wonders if there is a similar sort of question mark over the tyre wear of Lauda's car. Certainly Lauda now, with a lead of over half a minute, is going to be doing everything he can to preserve the car, not to give it any extra stress, and you see indeed him pacing himself to such a degree that Nigel Mansell has closed right up to Niki Lauda now. Nigel Mansell in the black and gold Lotus now on the tail of Niki Lauda, even though Mansell is right down in 9th place on the lap chart and a long way adrift of Lauda in terms of race distance. Lauda quite happily moving across to the right-hand side of the road, lets Mansell unlap himself. But of course Lauda still a very comfortable leader. Now the Frank Williams pit, with Frank Williams sitting characteristically hunched up with his sunglasses on the pit wall with his stopwatches in his hand, monitoring the whole progress of the race. He will now be sending the signals out to Rosberg that Lauda is definitely easing off. And every lap the board will come out to tell Rosberg precisely what the gap is between the leader and himself in 2nd place. There you see Patrese, and there you see Alboreto. So Patrese has snatched another place. Riccardo Patrese in that Brabham, which can't be handling very well with only one nose wing. Patrese has moved ahead of Michele Alboreto in the number 3 Tyrrell. There you see Alboreto. So a new 4th man now. And of course all the Brabham hopes resting on Riccardo Patrese's shoulders because of Nelson Piquet's departure, his rude departure into the wall earlier on. And Patrese now 4th man, Niki Lauda still the leader, Keke Rosberg still in 2nd place, Villeneuve still in 3rd place with a turbo Ferrari, but our new 4th man, Riccardo Patrese. Alboreto is 5th, and that once again you saw a glimpse of the other Ferrari, the turbo Ferrari, which has been parked now for most of the race. 14 laps left to go. We're on lap 61 now. Peroni's Ferrari, which has spent most of the race parked by the wall, and this has indeed been a race of attrition. Only 11 cars still running in the race now out of the 26 starters, and there is the one in fourth place, Riccardo Patrese of Italy with the Brabham. Brabham, who started the season with a very potent turbocharged BMW engine, to which they will no doubt return when the circus comes to Europe, but for the time being using a modified version of last year's car with the Cosworth engine, and of course this is the car that took Nelson Piquet to the World Championship in 1981. Slightly knock-kneed appearance because of that missing front nose wing, and that means that there will be less downforce on the front of Patrese's car. It means the car will tend to understeer going into corners, but it's obviously not worrying Patrese at all. There is De Angelis, and there is John Watson. Now Watson, Watson does it all wrong. Watson going very wide on that corner there, getting onto the slippery, dusty portion off the racing line. But that was Watson piling on the pressure to try and get closer to Elio De Angelis. We're going to see it again. Watson, after his pit stop, trying to get back into the championship points, and he understeers. He turns his wheels to the left, but the car doesn't want to go to the left and slows straight on. Almost toboggan straight on, and goes so near to those ever-present concrete walls. But Watson, lucky on that occasion, luckier than Cesaris, luckier indeed than Piquet, and Watson still in the race, but that has meant that his battle with De Angelis has taken a setback. There you see Alboreto in Tyrrell number 3, and he is still in 5th place. And there's the 4th man just in front of him, in the Brabham number 2, Riccardo Patrese. Nelson Piquet's Brabham, of course, carrying number 1 this year in honour of the fact that its driver is the current reigning world champion. Piquet watching this race, as is Alain Prost, as is Bruno Giacomelli, as is René Arnoux. All of them spectating, more starters spectating than are still in the race. And of course all of them trying to calculate in their heads exactly what this is going to do to the World Championship points position. There the leader with Patrese now also up to Lauda, and Patrese doesn't want to delay because Alboreto is fighting back, and certainly Patrese will not want to stay behind Niki Lauda, the leader, if it means that Alboreto is going to get too close to him. And Patrese goes through, so yet another car unlaps itself on Niki Lauda. And Alboreto now has to stay behind Lauda through the twisty bit. We see Patrese passing him once more, and Lauda making no effort to keep the door shut, moving courteously to the left-hand side of the road. Here you see Lauda, the tactician. He knows exactly where he is in the race. He's been reading his pit signals. He knows exactly what the gap is back to himself, back between himself and Keke Rosberg. And no doubt he is worried about tyre wear. And he's wanting to drive no faster than he has to preserve this lead to the 75th lap. Lauda showing all the experience, all the intelligence that took him to 2 World Championships for Ferrari in 1975 and 77, and also showing the grit and determination which brought him back to racing after that horrendous accident in 1976 at the Nürburgring, when, let's remember, he was back in the cockpit and racing only 6 weeks after very nearly being burnt to death. Niki Lauda then back in the cockpit after a 2-year layoff, and there's the gap now down to 22.2 seconds, and we've got now 11 laps left. So there is Rosberg's task. He has to make up 2 seconds a lap on Niki Lauda and get past him. So Lauda pacing himself, keeping that cushion, but knowing that a little mistake, a little spin, could cost him the 22 seconds and give Rosberg the advantage he needs. Patrese, Alboreto, Lauda in front of them all in the race, but behind them on the road. And there is the man in second place. Keke Rosberg, with everything to gain by being absolutely foot on the floor all the way through to the end. He also will want to preserve his tires to the end, but knowing Keke Rosberg, I am quite convinced that he'll 19 seconds now. He's made up nearly 3 seconds in one lap. So that's the sort of pressure that Rosberg is keeping on. Rosberg clearly going faster than anybody else in this race in second place. So with 10 laps left, the pit signals will be going out from the Frank Williams pit. Rosberg is closing. Preserve your car, but also preserve your lead. Rosberg driving as hard as he knows how, but still keeping very tidy, still the neat line. Rosberg, whose Formula One style used to be very much of the style known as hairy. He used to slide the car around. He used to be very, very impressive to watch in the wet. But these modern Formula One cars don't like to be slid. They reward a neat and tidy driving style, and that is exactly what Rosberg is giving. There's Patrese, there is Alboreto, there is Lauda, and 18.5 seconds behind this man, Niki Lauda, the leader, is the second man, the charging Keke Rosberg. Still Gilles Villeneuve in third place in the Ferrari, in the Turbo Ferrari, and he's all on his own, preserving his third place. Riccardo Patrese fourth, Michele Alboreto fifth, and Elio De Angelis still sixth, having fought off that challenge from seventh man John Watson. And here is John Watson's teammate Niki Lauda, still in the lead. Lauda with 116 Grand Prix now under his belt, and he's won 17 of them, and the gap's gone back to 20 seconds. Now that must be very, very demoralising for Keke Rosberg, because having drawn back 2.5 seconds, having closed the gap, Lauda has put in a quick one. Lauda has been able to pull back the 2.5 seconds he lost, and that shows that Lauda is in command. And Rosberg will read that off his pit signals. There you see 19.5 seconds. Villeneuve in third place, way, way back. Patrese, Alboreto and De Angelis. And with 4 laps to go, Lauda has almost 20 seconds lead still. And all he must do is preserve his car, make not a mistake, and all will be well. That's Slim Borgard just behind him. And once again, this consistency of Lauda, the tidy, relentless, disciplined approach of the Austrian, paying off dividends on this very punishing circuit, the circuit which rewards the slightest error with an accident. And Niki Lauda hasn't put a wheel wrong. Not only has he not put a wheel wrong, but he's managed to drive defensively and keep out of the way of other people's accidents. An absolutely exemplary drive from the front row. He made a slightly cautious start, realising that there could well be early accidents in the traffic, as indeed there were, and as Arnoux and Giacomelli disappeared off into the barriers, Lauda was presented with his second place and then took his opportunity to take his first place in lapping the back markers. And Borgard has gone in front of Lauda now. Slim Borgard, the pop drummer, he drums or has drummed on occasion for the pop group ABBA in Sweden. Borgard, the number 2 Tyrrell driver. This is only his 10th Grand Prix, and it must feel pretty exciting for him to be able to go past Niki Lauda in the closing stages, but Lauda driving absolutely within his limits. In fact, Lauda staying close to Borgard, absolutely within his limits, coasting home. And Keke Rosberg still between 18 and 20 seconds behind. Lauda goes back in front of Borgard, and Rosberg still between 18 and 20 seconds behind, knowing that there's absolutely nothing he can do about this man, Niki Lauda. 1.5 laps to go now. This is the penultimate time that the McLaren will be extended along Shoreline Drive, the fastest part of the circuit. Lauda has a moment to read his gauges before he hits the brakes, drops down through the gearbox and goes through the new right, left, right section at the end of Shoreline Drive, past Pironi's stranded Ferrari once more, and through the twists on up the hill towards the start-finish straight, or the finish straight I should say, because of course the start is on Shoreline Drive. And here he comes past the pits, and the signal will tell him this is the last lap. And this must be the time when even the calmest and most disciplined of drivers, as Niki undoubtedly is, listens for a falter in the engine note, listens for some sort of little problem which can spell the heartbreak that drivers have so often had in the very closing stages of a Grand Prix. But Lauda's concentration relentlessly sending him on his way on this final lap. The brilliant 33-year-old Austrian, what a comeback. He retired from racing 2 years ago saying that there were more things to life than driving round in circles. He's established his airline in Austria. Here he is now, driving in circles once more to remarkably good effect. The crowd already waving and clapping. His third Grand Prix back, and he's going to win it. Down Shoreline Drive once more, 160, 165 miles an hour. Still Slim Borgard, several laps down, following in the wheel tracks of the master. And already we can hear the cheers and the whistles, we can see the wave programs as Niki Lauda consolidates his comeback with a superb drive here at Long Beach. Away from the shore, up through the twists, on up the hill for the final time. The man with the checkered flag is ready on the rostrum, and Niki Lauda wins the United States Grand Prix West. A tremendous victory there for Lauda. And as he turns now down the hill, we wait for Rosberg to come through to take second place. Gilles Villeneuve is going to take third place. And a fine drive from Riccardo Patrese after his earlier problems is going to net him fourth. But let's look at Lauda getting out of the cockpit. And he looks almost as fresh as a daisy. 2 hours very, very hard work in that cockpit. And undoubtedly Lauda now a very, very fit man indeed. Off comes the crash helmet. A wave to the crowd. And that's the characteristic. Lauda, his balaclava helmet back on the back of his head, a swig of water, and there the results. 14.6 seconds was the gap in the end. A fine second place for Rosberg. Villeneuve, of course, third. Patrese fourth. Alboreto fifth in the Tyrrell. De Angelis sixth in the Lotus, a lap down. And there is Villeneuve with Niki Lauda going forward up to the winner's rostrum. And Villeneuve looking rather more tired as he swings his water than does Niki Lauda, still with the balaclava on his head. The plaudits of the crowd. There is Villeneuve. And of course this is going to be good news also for Keke Rosberg, because there he is now in the lead in the World Championship, and just 3 points cover the leading three. Rosberg with 14, Prost with 13, of course he didn't score today. Lauda after that fine win with 12. Piquet down in fourth place now with 9. and that means a very exciting position in the World Championship as we look forward now to the first European round, the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola, just 3 weeks away, and we celebrate Niki Lauda's storybook return to the winner's rostrum of Grand Prix racing.